So I will start by explaining the title, and then I would like to proceed this talk as it were an imaginary dance. What's choreography is slowly built through the interaction of thinking gestures in form of visual, words, sounds, and the intersection of theories and practices. So the aim is to present the experimental work of female choreographers, thinkers, and artists, each and every one with their different language and poetics, performing examples of feminist political alliances, what here I call relationalities, around some ecological and political complexities. I will mainly rely on the feminist transnational perspective of Astrida Imanis, environmental humanities thinker, and currently a senior lecturer in gender and cultural studies at the University of Sydney. I will borrow a few movements of her theoretical work about hydrofeminism and apply them to the aesthetic language of some contemporary dance practitioners. Their bodily responses are not meant to answer to the environmental disasters carried on the winds of the Anthropocene. What they inscribe and diversify on the watery stage and on the liquidity of the digital screen are acts of responsibility towards the question. Responsibility, is it's with an hyphen, responsibility to recall, Donna Haraway, and they ask questions in order to imagine new possible worlds to be created on the ruins, as Anna Singh would put it. Other forms of survival and of creative imagination. So thinking and dancing, to me, there is no difference between those two movements. Dance here is not used as a metaphor, but as a literal description of the activity of thinking through the act of writing with the body, and more specifically with the female body. To me, researching the relation between thinking and dancing is a feminist working practice itself. It helps me to understand that the critique of binary oppositions is not just a philosophical one, it is very materially grounded in the expression of the political body, in its language and in its movement. And this leads to the first two quotations that will set the scene of the critical, methodological and performative premise of this talk. Actually, it is impossible for me to start and to begin this imaginary dance without establishing the very first gesture of relationality between two matriarchs. I like to call them so Isadora Duncan and Helen Sixou. They both have activated my interest, which is of course also passion, for women's body writings as a decentering, deconstructing and subversive force. Isadora Duncan is the mother of modern dance, the pioneer of a new female body writing. In her flesh new style indeed, she challenged the rigid canon of romantic ballet. So she began choreographing for the female body at a time when womanhood was not celebrated in a liberating fashion, at a time when women exercised power as teachers and as dancers much more than as directors and choreographers. And here I must remember that ballet, with its famous repertoire of works, what I call patriarchal. So I don't know if you know Giselle, Swan Lake. No, it's a tradition in the hands of male choreographers, librettists, composers who choreograph it. And when I say choreograph, it's also to command, the gesture, the movement of the ballerina on the stage, reflecting the ideals of a patriarchal society and a patriarchal culture. So about ballet, Duncan said, it condemns itself by enforcing the deformation of the beautiful woman's body. So Duncan interrupted this archive with free-flowing costumes, bare feet, loose hair. She took the stage inspired by the ancient Greeks and by the music of the nature. Feminism was at its infancy, let's say, at that time. But she stepped in as a leader, not only in her art, but also socially. And there is this quotation as, her niece, Dorothée Seliman, reminds us. Duncan's prediction in 1902 that future dancers would, I quote, dance not in the form of a nymph, nor fairy, nor coquette, but in the form of a woman in her greatest and purest expression, end of quote. Inspired significantly many of the second generation of modern dancers and pioneers, such as the most famous Martha Graham, Doris Humphrey, whose companies were all female and even more importantly, were directed and choreographed by women. Her sources of inspiration were the waves of the sea, which she recreated on stage. Here is a picture from Watery Study, where Isadora Duncan dances with waters. And you can find also some quotations in which she says, nature is the source of dance. This is the mission of dancer of the future. She writes these essays, the dancer of the future. She is coming, the dancer of the future, the free spirit who will inhabit the body of new women, more glorious than any woman that has yet been. She shall dance the freedom of women. So Duncan thinking gestures recall the subversive movement of Medusa, the Greek marine creature refigured by Cixous. Hélène Cixous, the mother of écriture féminine, doesn't need a presentation. She speaks for herself, of course, as in this quote from the well-known essay, The Laugh of Medusa in 1975. Maybe we all remember the opening lines and the urgency of her call. So women must write herself, must write about women and bring women to writing from which they have been driven away as violently as from their bodies. Women must put herself in the text by her own movement. Well known is also her reference to the theorization of how what she terms femininity is expressed in prose writing through a liquefaction of ordering structures. Write and your self-seeking text will know itself better than flesh and blood, and then later we are ourselves see. Given the association of water and femininity, Cixous describes the écriture féminine in an abundance of aqueous images. It manifests as waves and floats, flourishing in watery habitats. Playing on the homophony between mère, sea, and mère, mother, she draws on the analogy between the maternal body and the sea, insisting on both as creative and life-giving environments. So water stages the dynamism and the creative powers of female corporalities and textualities, and simultaneously it is much more. Water is the element that ties human beings to the world around them, from the oceans that surround us to the water that makes up most of our bodies. The deep implicancy of waters, you know, as Da Silva and Newman have beautifully put it in their film. In the interstices of this planetary relationship also lies the hydrofeminism advanced by Astrida Nemanitz. Her volume Bodies of Water, Post-Human Feminist Phenomenology of 2017 has quickly become an alternative feminist response to the Anthropocene or the Menthropocene. Her work primarily investigates waters as a site of damage, desire, fear, and fecundity, and as an idea and imaginary, but also as an environment and embodied place. She draws inspiration from close readings of philosophers, writers, Cixous and Irigaray are among them, artists and waters themselves, for a plural view of feminism that is intersectional, anti-racist, and devoted to acknowledging the importance of queer and anti-colonial theory to contemporary environmental thought. She makes a persuasive case for reimagining embodiment from the perspective of our body's wet constitution. And this reimagining is explicitly opposed to the dominant thinking of subjectivity transmitted by Western metaphysics, which, as is well known, posits the human in static terms as an autonomous and discrete individual. To think our bodies of water, or better to think as water, is to acknowledge that our existence and our thought does not take place in a vacuum. We are porous watery beings in a myriad relations with other bodies of water, and we depend on these bodies for our very survival. So the materiality of water, therefore, establishes a pattern, a logic, or better, an hydrologic that unfolds a feminist ecology of relational difference. And quoting again Nemanese, she says, water also is continuously gestating. Nemanese indeed stresses that thinking about relationality, which is at the ground of hydrofeminism, consists not only in acknowledging the relation, more important is to think about how we are related, what enables us to relate and who benefits from the relation. We can easily realize, and also about this we, you know, she tries to investigate and to interrogate, you know, what there is in this we can easily realize that we are differentiated through and as and by water as well. So by setting in motion some thinking gestures of Nemanese, this imaginary dance I'm trying to perform also encourages opening up a new ethic of relation and of care between the humans, the modern humans, and the planetary waters that are increasingly in crisis. As all of the multitude of life forms that depend on these waters are made increasingly precarious, as water also holds traces of all the other differences that water has made in terms of migration, displacements, and exile, caring better for other bodies of water seems more urgent than ever. So in order to define the patterns for what kind of performativity a feminist ecology of relationalities might, in my view, deploy, I will proceed as I were consulting a matriarchive, an imaginary and personal deposit of memory where women think and dance, consult and feel, transmit and transform the genealogy of the performative gesture in with water. Astrid Nemanese conceives her bodies of water mainly as figurations, quoting Elisabeth Roche and Rosie Bradotti. Actually, all her book and all her writing, that she adopts this politic of citations as a feminist practice. So those figurations can, for instance, assume the form of feminist protests and can bring into existence alliances, namely hydro commons. So I will illustrate the activists that have moved the radical eco-feminist dance protests of Anna Alprin, and I have to say I'm very sad in this moment because she just died 2 days ago while I was also preparing this talk. So talking about her work today is also a small tribute for me to her. And then I will discuss some choreographic projects in which the relational experience of the dance event is reconfigured in the difference of the hydro commons outlined by Nemanese. So following some of the issues outlined by the course program, the relationality between bodies of water takes the form of counter-capitalist assemblages in the work of Mara Oscar Cassiani, Be Water, My Friend. I will possibly talk about this other performance with these bodies of water very quickly because I don't think we have the time, but at some point the poetical and political watery roads traced by these works transmigrate to the liquid materiality of the screen. So I will discuss the virtual mobilization of international artists participating in the Open Border Project, which is a call of relationality launched online by the Festival of Burgundy as reaction to the so-called refugees crisis in Europe. Here, more specifically, the Mediterranean water becomes a sonic space of mutual recognition where dancing hydrocommons turn to and perform gestures of solidarity and of hospitality. One last premise, the imaginary dance that I would like to practice with you addresses our attention to the somatic body, to its role of feeling with the senses and also its role of decision-making, ethics and politics, to not get lost, although the disparate positionality from which we all come from. Anna Tsing titles Dancing, the last interlude between part 3 and part 4 of a volume, The Mushroom at the End of the World. In this, she mentions the strategy that foragers have for looking for the lean lines of the mushroom lives. It is like a dance, she writes, and although every forager dances in this sense, not all the dances are alike. Each dance is shaped by communal histories, and I will say herstories, with their disparate aesthetics and orientations. So with this kind of orientation in my mind, I will talk now about the radical body of Anna Alprin. She is, or she was, I have to say, one of the most influential figures of the American dance scene from the 1940s to the present. As I said, she died just 2 days ago after a long and intense life. She's known for her radical experimentation with theatrical forms and the use of improvisation in transdisciplinary performances. Working for much of her career on an elevated outdoor dance deck in a forest in Martin County, California, built by her partner and landscape architect Lawrence Alprin, her work championed the abandonment of performance enclosures for site-specific movement. For Alprin, and I quote, the environmental opening of the deck is simultaneously an opening of the performing body and of performative aesthetics to the complex restlessness of nature itself. Her early work often concerned with racism and the politics of sexuality and health. She, for example, explored a lot the nudity on the stage, and she assembled a group of dancers that were HIV positive people. And in her later years, she turned toward pedagogic initiatives, large-scale public rituals, and practices of conciliation and acceptance in relation to social division, ecology, and mortality. Between 1966 and 68, Alprin led a series of cross-disciplinary experiments in the environment workshops that brought together dancers, architects, environmental designers, and others in an experimental process aimed to foster group creativity through environmental awareness. Together with her husband, she created the process called RSBP cycle, based on a common approach to space and dance making, as well as a shared concern for the environment and its diversity. And also in this kind of conceptualization is interesting, for example, the concept of eco-score, resuming the logic of the ecosystem, and just as in nature, the result of a process emerges without being imposed, with the same attitude, a performer is invited to conceive the creative process. So the mechanism of eco-scoring thus becomes a generator of solutions, of recycles, and reuses of the co-creative gesture. Planetary dances were very popular as well, created in 1980s and still going on. This is, for example, the last version at Venice Biennale in 2017. It's a ritual and participatory dance. Again, in announcing her eco choreography of 2003, titled Returning Home, Alprin states, the body is our home, as is the larger body of Earth. When these two bodies move in harmony, a dance unfolds. Both are made whole. In Returning Home, Alprin seeks a renewed connection with nature. Her corporality scatters movement along the edges of the earth, meets wind, fire, and incorporates water. So I'm going to show you now a small extract of this video documentation, and there is also a short introduction by Anna Alprin.
That's part of being in the process of how nature operates, is being able to accept what is at that moment. And I accept the fact that my body isn't perfect, and that it's nothing to be ashamed of or to have a judgment about. It just is what it is. It's sometimes in nature there are violent actions tidal waves and storms and fires and actions that are destructive and destroy. And so it is with the body as well. Birth, new life, seems to be associated with water, something that could be swept up onto the shore.
And I'm sorry for the interruption. And so, as you can see, between loss and liberation, between destructive force and generative beauty, her feminine radical body thinks and dances like a body of water, absorbs the cycle of continuous transcorporeal becoming, where the substance of the human is finally inseparable from the environment, to quote Nemanese, recognizing, recovering, and returning to its roots. Her feminist ecology of relationality is still tangible in the desire to co-create experiences of alliance to be felt with the body. And in this sense, she took part in the artistic project titled Ally with the artist and performer Janine Antoni and choreographer Steven Petronio. And I just want to show you very quickly, this is the catalog that they made for this project, which is very, very beautiful, full of amazing pictures. This is the deck, the famous deck from where she was performing and inviting, and really lots of performers and choreographers passed from this deck during the century, we can say. And this is interesting because Ally also involves Hélène Sixou, and who contributed with the text The Warbling of a Thrush, which is a very moving text at the crossroads of poetry, memory, and dream. And again, in 2017, the three women, Alpri, Antoni, and Sixou, all with their different urgency, have co-created the visual essay Spirit Labor. This is a collaborative project, a compelling dialogue that traces a genealogy of creative practices inclined to element exposure and non-forces. And this is interesting because, you know, there is a short extract, and I put here the website of, this is an extract of 5 minutes where you can see Antoni, Alpri, and Sixou. So performing hydrocommons in difference. So co-living, co-creating the tangle of bodies, times, and languages that gathers together in the collaborative projects I'm going to present now, which are more contemporary times, evokes the embodied knowledges that facilitate the contact with one another. The kind of relationality that support the difference of the hydrocommons of water, and I quote Nemanis, as an intimate entanglement of relationality that never collapse this interconnectedness into an undifferentiated mass. So here it is, Mara Oscar Cassiani, an Italian Wi-Fi based artist working at the crossroad of performance, choreography, and new media. Her research is focused on creating contemporary iconography by challenging the potentiality of new languages stemming from the internet, brutal capitalism, and society of desire. The relationship with our audience at large is explored via the rituality of clubbing, dance group, and through the common space of what she calls digital hydration, that is the watery consistency of the digital space. She explores the alteration on and the hybridization of our body's image using filters, so as you can see, collages and cyborg assemblages in a trans-feminist perspective. Inspired by the monologue "Be Water, My Friend" by Bruce Lee in 1971, and I have to say he had a major influence in b-boying culture, a form of hip-hop dancing which is also today known as breakdance. In accordance with her poetic of Relationalities that unites, which is based on the rituality of clubbing and as a powerful practice of aggregation, Mara Oscar Cassiani constructs a group dance as a common space for identities and for difference. In her own words, group dance becomes the tuner and the choreographic sign of union between the several corporalities that take part to the performance in the hope for a future of coexistence. This is the text that she transformed and then she translated in dance. We will be water, we will be river, we will be the same dance. We may have no shape, but we may also have the same shape. We will be different, but we will be also the same. We will be separated, but we will be together. And those are two short extracts that she accepted to give very kindly. And this is another one from the Festival of Sant'Arcangelo, which is a very nice and beautiful festival.
Di illustratrice e nel futuro spero di avere i soldi per fare delle vacanze continuando a disegnare e quando sogno l'acqua. What we're going to do right here is go back, way back into time.
And this is just after, you know, when Italy tried to open in July. Lots of people took part in this festival really as a practice to be together, to become together. And Be Well Water, you know, the hydrocommon set in motion by Mara Oscar takes the form of counter-capitalist assemblages of bodies thinking and dancing as water, to be water and to become together. It is the need, the desire to meet again beyond the materiality that connects us today, more than the flow of hyperconnectivity, the underwater fiber optic cables that cross the oceanic floors. So Be My Friend premiered in 2020 at the Sant'Arcangelo Festival 50, and the edition named Fantastic Future, Futuro Fantastico, a shape-shifting festival of jellyfish, cyborgs, and companion species. This is the tagline that the Motos, the artistic director of the festival, chose. And as they say, the tagline references the magic, restless, shape-shifting force of a 50-year-old festival that always rises from its ashes like a phoenix while also remaining tentacularly connected to many aspects of the present. They really try to interrogate, and change the status of things, of the theater during the pandemic. And they say the novels of Nigerian author Nnedi Okorafor that they read during this pandemic, inhabited by half humans, half jellyfish, hybrid creatures, urges us to focus on the theme of interdependence. So it was very interesting for me to see how literature keeps reflect reality and also inspires gestures of curatorship, because this is we are in the realm of the curatorial work here. And then I won't show you this one, but this is just another performance. Was titled "Is Bodies of Water," just to remind and recall how this potentiality and this interest of questioning bodies of water and performing bodies of water is circulating nowadays in transnational perspective and in a feminist perspective. Because this is another performance all made by all women, but I will go a little bit faster now because I think my time is up. But yes, talking about interconnection and talking about this kind of relationalities, water interconnects bodies, humans and non-human. Water is also a planetary archive and a retainer of memory. Water always remember, as Jackie Alexander writes in Pedagogies of Crossing, that Manuela yesterday gave us a very interesting insight about that. Similarly, the Black feminist scholar Christina Sharp, among others, draws our attention to the archive that is the Middle Atlantic Passage, an ocean still animated by slavery and the anti-Blackness that persists in its wake. So does the Mediterranean Sea today, whose water brings the bodies of migrants back to the surface. So now I would like to talk in the end about this question of listening and touching water. So the exercise of thinking and dancing differently with water now involves more deeply the sense of listening and touching. Between the oral and the corporeal, then I ask, what are the resonances occurring between the migrant, the foreign, the other, crossing the Mediterranean on a desperate journey, and the Euro-Mediterranean citizen here witnessing this tragic crossing from the other shore? What are the sonorous reciprocities involved in this cultural, political, and performative phenomena? So I would like to propose alternative sensorial and identitarian modes of inhabiting and cohabiting the Euro-Mediterranean space, a geopolitical space, which is also a methodological resource for aesthetical and critical investigations, a potential zone of performance for activism and reimagination. Touch, it's a gesture that responds to the call of respect and reverence without appropriating the subjectivity of the other. This is a quote by the French philosopher Lucie de Garay, who speaks in The Cultivation of Touch, which is a short essay of 2013. To touch, therefore, is here understood as the sonic bodily gestures that co-create experiences of reciprocity through and with water. Recognizing the fact that someone is touching and is touched in return opens new sensorial ways of perceiving Mediterranean soundscape, that is, to live and hear Mediterranean waters and its multiple bodies of water continually exceeding their sonorous and linguistic boundaries. A kind of watery soundscape is produced by the multiple corporalities participating in the assemblage of open borders, the collective dance field project produced by the Video Dance Festival of Burgundy after the dreadful shipwreck of more than 300 migrants off the shore of Lampedusa in 2013. Responding to a viral all-like call, trans-Mediterranean and Mediterranean artists were asked to submit 40-second films addressing concepts such as borders, inclusion, asylum, and solidarity. Each video was then edited together to co-create a longer film to be shared at festival and in open access on the web. From Greece, Italy, Spain, and many other countries, several gestures and sounds were captured on the screen to host movements of escape, oppression, fear, but also of desire, of hope and survival, in tune or in contact with the refugees who cross and sea cross the Mediterranean borders. Many performers, and here is an extract, choose the sea or other water bodies as powerful sound sources for choreographing their gestures. So as Astrid and Imani suggests, miniaturization of an imaginary hypersea where everything touches everything, we are not only bodies of water, but bodies in water, in different ways as well. Water indeed, in its various mixtures, articulates sounds and other matters between and across bodies. Water conduits as it conveys streams of refugees upon ocean currents. So performing Nemonese hydrologic, the sonic water of the Mediterranean imaginary extends and comprises the entangled choreographies of open borders, which still remain on the limit of a touch, which is never grasping, never appropriating, or penetrating what is touched. The editing cut and make style of open borders emerges from an attempt to listen and to touch what moves inside and beyond the politics of exclusion of the Euro-Mediterranean law. And it is supported by the desire to perform the right of hospitality that breaks with that law. So the rapid diffusion of these gestures in the territorialized space of the internet allows the congregation of a hydro-dancing community that dissents against European agendas of mobility control and on Mediterranean borders. If hospitality means to touch and to be touched by the foreigner, the watery body sounds of open borders actualize a way to receive the other in a shared ecology of coexistence that happens between touch and separation. For Jean-Luc Nancy, this tension is the wall point of touching, where the foreign contact draws near, although his touch remains foreign in that contact, always spaced and displaced. A similar tension and desire also returns in Liquid Path, danced by the Italian choreographer Filomena Rusciano, who opens her work with the following words. I embodied the migrant's courage. I wore her clothes, her hope, floating in the sea. Unsettled as a message stored in a bottle, I traveled towards uncertain paths. Liquid Path plunges the viewer, listener into other watery soundscapes. Indeed, as Rusciano moves inside out of a glass bottle, her body becomes blurred, opaque, almost as ungraspable as the water. Through the experimental dissimulation of her bodily gestures into watercolor, in doing so, she affirms the urgency of another sense the necessity to consult a different corporeal and sonorous map. So now I would like to ask Lada, how minutes do I still have? Unmute, I can hear you.
A couple of minutes, yes.
Okay, so I will show the short version, let's say, of liquid path. I'm sorry, this is not the short version. This is the short. So in the act of listening and yeah, I can maybe leave this one. In the act of listening and touching migrant austerity, at some point Rusciano receives from the outside another water-based body. The female body extends herself and seems to host in a womb-like environment the liquid shape of a presence not yet born. This is a scene of gestation, the very first experience of hospitality and of listening. She seems to align herself with the multitude of disembodied no-bodies, the anonymous corpse dispersed in the necropolis of the Mediterranean today. If this contact is imaginary, this sonic body of water also connects with the not yet born, with the ones who have survived the crossing and are now paving their existence into the new geographies of arrival. So for me, this is not the first time that I conclude a talk with this work. It always seems to me very powerful and I don't know, very concrete every time that I watch it. It seems to absorb a new sense and affect. So in the end, because in the end, it seems to me that the puissance of this memory also blurs the margins of genders and of sexual difference, because really at some point it seems that everything blurs. So at the closure of this imaginary dance, puissance becomes joyeuse disturbance. In the words of Hélène Sixou, whose body of water has participated in the choreography of this work and says, it is me, I with the other within me. It's one gender going into the other, one language going through the other. So thank you very much.